Good morning, everyone. We're so thankful for your time and effort throughout this panel this morning as we go through this. And I know the students out there are very much looking forward to hearing your stories and some of your wisdom as we go through and answer some of these questions. So we'll introduce ourselves first, and then we'd love to hear from you. My name is Ben Olander, and I'm currently serving as a Minnesota FFA state president. Currently sitting in my dorm room here at the University of Minnesota Crookston, majoring in ag business and agronomy. And I'm originally from Staples, Minnesota, located in the central portion of the state.
And my name is Elaina Knott, and this year I'm serving as the Minnesota FFA State Treasurer, and I'm also in Crookston at the University of Minnesota Crookston, studying agriculture education with the intent to be a teacher, and I'm originally from the Thief River Falls FFA chapter. So with that, we'll hop right into our first question, which is the basic. Please introduce yourself, your job title, and your company, and a little bit more about what you do at that job in your position. And we'll start with Kelsey.
Thank you both, Ben and Elaina. I really appreciate the opportunity to present to you and all FFA members today. I'm Kelsey Johnson. I'm president of the Iron Mining Association, and I've been president of the Iron Mining Association for the last 5 years. My job is primarily to be the spokesperson for the iron mining industry. I represent the iron mines in Northeast Minnesota, and then I also represent about 200 vendor member businesses who work directly with the mines each and every day, supplying goods and services. So really our reach is pretty far reaching. So Minnesota is actually proud to be the #1 producer of iron ore in the country. We produce about 85% of domestic iron ore needs, and there's only one other state that actually produces iron ore, and that's in Michigan. And that's largely because the iron ore body goes under Lake Superior. And we're actually, because of our unique positioning in Minnesota at the head of the Great Lakes, we're so fortunate to be able to supply that iron through the Sulaks and into the Great Lakes system. So we're unique in that regard, but we supply that iron to the steel mills who produce trucks, tractors, trains, refrigerators, microwaves, cars, everything that you can think of in your daily life that has any kind of magnetic properties. That's largely coming from a supply from our iron in Northeast Minnesota. So that's primarily what I do each and every day, is just represent that iron and our iron mines in Northeast Minnesota, but I also lobby, and that's where my expertise lies. Prior to joining the Iron Mining Association, I worked for 3 years with the Grocery Manufacturers Association, and they are the voice for the food manufacturers and consumer products. Now the Grocery Manufacturers Association has been renamed the Consumer Brands Association, and they represent them all throughout the nation and internationally as well. I don't know if you want me to say anything more about my background or anything like that, but I'll hand it off to Mike to talk about all the cool things that he does.
Well, thank you, Kelsey, and Elaina and Ben. Thank you, and I'll echo Kelsey's comments. It's really an honor and a privilege to be part of this broadcast here today, and kind of making do in the times that we're in, and that's what we've all been doing really over the course of the last year, really. And for me, the last year has really been a time of transition. I've transitioned into this role as Executive Vice President of Minnesota Forest Industries and the Minnesota Timber Producers Association. So it's two associations kind of under one umbrella, if you will, one office, but two distinct and different organizations, really, as I like to say, representing the men and women who work in the woods and the families, the generations of families, the loggers who work in the woods, all the way through to the end-use products that are made and manufactured in Minnesota's mills. We're the fifth largest industry in the state of Minnesota, the forest products industry is. And there are more than 32,000 men and women who work in primary and secondary manufacturing facilities that manufacture, everything related to wood and paper. And then also, whether it be foresters who go through the woods and cruise, as they like to say, cruise for timber sales. So, it's a great industry. It's an industry with deep roots in Minnesota, and dates back more than 150 years in the state. I grew up in the small town of Baudette, Minnesota. My goal when I was your age Ben and Elaina, was to be the next Al Shaver. Not that you would know that name, but for anybody who followed the old Minnesota North Stars in the sport of hockey in Minnesota, he was the play-by-play voice for the Minnesota North Stars back in the day before the Wild. And I kind of grew up in that, with hockey in the blood up there. And I had stone hands, slow feet, but a lot of heart, and so I knew I could speak fairly well. I couldn't skate that great, but anyway. But career paths kind of take you in different directions, right? And so, had the opportunity over time, got into broadcasting initially, and then kind of migrated into the forest product industry for a number of years, then worked for rural electric cooperatives, because rural issues in rural communities have always been really close to my heart and very important. And now I'm back here in this sector doing much of the same work that Kelsey just described for her organization, the Iron Mining Association. I have the honor and the privilege to do it for the folks who work in the woods and the folks who work in the mills, to advocate on their behalf and to make sure that we've got an adequate resource supply that's available, that make and manufacture essential goods that we use on a daily basis, whether it's the wood and the paneling behind each of you, Ben and Elaina, or whether it's the desks that you sit at, the homes that you live in, or even the books that you read. So we make and manufacture some very important products in Minnesota. I'm proud to be part of that.
That's so cool. And it's so cool to hear those unique stories and what led you there. And Mike sharing his story about broadcasting. And our next question for you kind of relates back to this, and I think both of you kind of touched on a little bit, but what led you to this career? Maybe there was a college, was there a coursework in a high school or a college course? Or maybe you had an experience where you were able to job shadow, different experiences. We'd love to hear how and what led you to this career.
Sure. And you're going to let me lead, I suppose. So I graduated from Duluth Central. I grew up in this rural area that you can see behind me. And this is my home. Grew up just outside of Duluth, and really had a passion for rural life, and wanted to move back as soon as possible. But at St. Catherine University, I studied ethics, and was fortunate enough to be elected Senate president. And in the role of Senate president, we lobbied and advocated for student loan programs for private college students. And as Senate president, I worked with a number of other presidents from other colleges and universities in the private college council. And we got to lobby for the first time. And so it was really fun to go to the Capitol and talk about some of those things that were affecting us as students each and every day. And then I also was the student liaison for the Minnesota Attorney General's office. And at the time, we were facing a number of different issues related to student housing. Students were trying very hard to live off campus, but we were growing population in some areas that didn't necessarily want students to live in. So we worked very closely with Mike Hatch and tried to ensure that students had a fair opportunity to get housing in the communities that they also attended their educational institutions. So that's how it all began for me. But I didn't take a traditional path after graduating from college. I heard some bad advice while I was in college. One of my very smart friends told me, "You'll never make a dime in politics." And I listened to her. And so I thought, there's no way that I will ever be able to have any opportunities in politics. And I shouldn't have. So for 5 years, I worked in sales throughout Northeast Minnesota, living at home, and got transferred down to the Twin Cities, started a master's program, and really found my passion in politics. I started again as an intern in the Minnesota State Senate. I'm a very persistent person. So I walked into the Capitol one day and just decided I was going to find a job. I found an unpaid internship with the Senate Education Chair, a guy by the name of Leroy Stumpf. He was the senator from Northwest Minnesota, and he was chair of the Education Committee. And from there, I started to build my career. So I interned with him, and I'll never forget, on the last day of session, I said, "Oh, I'll be back and I'll see you guys tomorrow." And they laughed at me and they said, "No one's going to be here. Don't come back." And so I had to take another 8 months before I found a paid position within the Minnesota House. I became basically a secretary, and I worked as a secretary for about a year with the Minnesota House. And then things transitioned, and I was asked, basically power shifted, and I lost my position, and I marched right back into the Capitol 2 weeks after losing my position with the Minnesota House. And I was sure I was going to find a job, and I landed in a contract lobbying job, and I worked with 12 to 15 different clients. That was really fun. And then the opportunity to become the director of state affairs for the Grocery Manufacturers Association presented itself. And so I followed that to DC and lobbied in 27 states, and then got tired after doing that and came back to northern Minnesota, ran for state house as an independent candidate in northeast Minnesota, the most sparse, biggest house district in the state, and was very happy with my 16% vote. And unfortunately, it wasn't enough to get me across the finish line to become the representative from the area. But I continue to follow my passion of being involved in politics, and this position thankfully opened up as president of the Iron Mining Association, and I applied and thankfully got the job.
Well, I don't know if you want me to just kind of pick up where Kelsey left off, but I guess I would, if I were given some advice here, I guess that's our opportunity here today, and we are doing that. So, we live in a relationship-based world, and that's just so important. Being able to work hard and follow through are important intangibles that you need to bring into any workplace setting as well. Kelsey mentioned internships. That's how I got started right out of college too, with my first job in broadcasting. And then relationships unfolded, from there. So whether you're working in our world, whether it's in the woods or whether it's in the mills or whether it's in a job like mine, that you got to want to work and you got to want to learn. That's what the loggers who are employers would be, would tell you. And then for those people who want to kind of maybe go off onto their own and maybe branch out and own their own business someday, logging is actually an operation and a profession that you can, but like anything, you probably got to work for a good logger first, who's got a kind of a teaching heart, who's willing to show you how to do that. Or if you have an acclimation, maybe you want to do something in the trades, paper mills, mining facilities are great facilities to do all of that sort of stuff, whether it's pipe fitters, whether it's electricians, whether it's welders, you name it, all the way through. Maybe engineering, maybe it's post-secondary education beyond trade schools. There are so many opportunities in both of the sectors that Kelsey and I work in. And I guess really that would be my message. And that's what I've found too, because the path is never going to be what you think you map it out to be. And sometimes there are disruptions that happen to you along the way. Kelsey talked about it. I had the same experience in my first broadcasting job after working there for 7 years. They had cutbacks and I was one of the 5 casualties, but it turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to me in my life. And, I was able to apply the skills that I'd learned in that setting and then carry it over into the forest products industry, into a communications position. And I worked in public affairs and communications for one of the Minnesota forest products companies for 7 years before taking that over and working for rural electric co-ops, and then overseeing the member service for the local co-op based in Grand Rapids, Minnesota for a number of years, and now taking those skill sets to another level. I think, like anything, there's the opportunities in the role that I'm in now. And these opportunities are available for anybody if you have an eye and a mindset on continuing to learn, continuing to grow, and continuing to be authentic in everything that you do. And that just that opens doors. And so that's just kind of a broad overview of opportunities that might be in different parts of our sector or individually similar maybe to the path that I've been on or that Kelsey's been on.
Yeah, and I think that to Mike's point, I think in our profession, one of the biggest things that we find is that integrity is really important. When you say that you're going to do something, making sure that you do it, and then also just building relationships. Relationships really played a key role in making sure that I was able to secure that internship and then secure all of the future job opportunities I had. And so building those relationships, you'll never know exactly how your life is going to go, but those relationships can be key to making sure that your path is secure and that you'll always have something to follow after you've had an opportunity, or just following your curiosities. I think that with both of us, I think it's been about following our curiosities, following something that intrigues us, and in ensuring that we use that curiosity to learn more about the positions and learn more about the industries that we're working so closely with. And as Mike said, there's so many opportunities that's really challenging to nail down one path. You'll never know where it's going to lead you, but thankfully, as long as you're open to it, it can be a lot of fun.
Awesome. I absolutely love that. I'm a really big advocate for opportunities, and I've never really thought of it as you have so many opportunities and you never know which path those opportunities are going to lead you down. So that was really awesome to hear. So our next question for you kind of dives deeper into your positions as executive directors of your associations. So our next question for you is, what does a typical day look like for you in your position?
Not typical. If you're comfortable with the changing landscape and changing dynamics, then you'd be very comfortable in a role like mine. The difficulty I think that both of us face is that we have to be on our toes a lot, whether we're talking to legislators, talking to the media, or just doing spreadsheets and analytics. We have to bring the same enthusiasm to each and every role that we bring forward. And sometimes it means sitting in front of a computer for an entire day, writing up something that's important, or it means reaching out to some of our contacts to get information for one of our members. So it's really just every day is a new day, and every day is a new opportunity to reinvent yourself and also to just explore a little bit more about something that you may not have known anything about. I never in my lifetime imagined that I would, I've testified and talked to federal legislators, congressional members, never thought that I would be meeting with the president of the United States or meeting with prime ministers from other countries or meeting with international media. But each day is a new day. It's exciting. And as long as you bring the same enthusiasm and curiosity to the job each and every day, you'll always learn something new and you'll always be excited about the job.
Yeah. Again, I'd echo Kelsey's comments. I'd maybe just add one little element that I've learned over, 30 plus years of being in the workforce now. And I've kind of gone back to my roots a little bit in this regard. We live in an age and an era where electronic communication bombards us on a daily basis, and email is at the top of the list in terms of the things that, and I don't want to say they distract us, but it does. It can distract us, especially if we want to do some really some in-depth work. You got to be careful sometimes about this whole thing about multitasking. I think I found that in the course of my career. And what I found is I like to use the electronic scheduling and the calendars and that sort of thing to kind of map out, my week. I think there's lots of tools with calendar assistance and things like that. And email plays into that, where you can drag that into your calendar. But I would also just encourage you. I've kind of gone back to an old-fashioned quarterly planner here, where there's kind of a fair amount of detail that I can, both keep notes and then I keep kind of a daily schedules and then also can kind of keep track of my life, because science will prove this. Science does prove this out, that if you actually physically write something with your hand and you actually physically handwrite something, you retain that knowledge a lot better. And I find that, plugging things into a computer is good. And it's one method, but I kind of go with a hybrid system, and I've kind of gone, of course, I work for the pulp and paper folks. So, there's value there too, but seriously, if the big challenge, and I think in our lives, as Kelsey kind of described, is there's no day that's really the same. So you have to really work hard to stay organized, and you have to work hard to plan ahead. And if you're doing that, you're going to always be a little bit, it's always going to help at least kind of keep you moving forward, rather than kind of getting stuck and feeling sometimes just overwhelmed, because, it can happen. With the pace of change and the pace of, the bombarding that comes at you on a daily basis, you got to find systems that are going to help you make it work. And podcasts, by the way, there's some real great podcasts out there too for leadership and growth and all that sort of stuff. So that I'll put a plug for those things too.
And I think I'll dovetail off of what Mike just said. I think to that point, setting goals for yourself and figuring out kind of where you want to live, how you want to live, where where you'd like to be ideally can really help transform and invent the path that you're going to take. So if you know that you want to be in Southwest Minnesota or Northwest Minnesota, or perhaps you want to be in Central Minnesota, it really comes down to creating a path for yourself to ensure that you can have the lifestyle and live the life that you so choose. So keeping an eye on that. And then also in our case, we have goals for our associations, and we constantly are managing those goals and ensuring that we're meeting those goals each and every day through the work that we do. But at the same time, we have things like COVID vaccinations that you have to roll out, or things that get thrown onto your plate that you weren't expecting. It means keeping your eye forward, but also being able to look at the day-to-day and break it up into small bites.
Yeah, and I could totally echo what Mike said about the planner. I also have a handwritten planner that I keep every week and each month, just to keep track of everything. And I totally echo your comments. It really helps to keep it organized. And when you write it down, I seem to remember a lot better than when I put it on my Google Calendar, and sometimes I could forget that way. So as we move to the next question, we're going to focus on some of the valuable talents and skills that maybe you possess and you think are valuable in your job, but then also some valuable talents and skills that you're looking for in employees or the colleagues that you work around.
Well, I look primarily for skills that I don't have. I am not a very organized person like Mike is. So I actually look for people who are very organized. I look for qualities that I do not have, and those are I look for people who have maybe different qualities that I may not possess. And so I look very carefully for those things. I know what my strengths are, and I'm aware of those strengths, but I'm also aware of my weaknesses. I really am bad at analytics and looking at numbers when it comes to my finances. And so I actually hired a bookkeeper. I have an accounting firm also, because I want to make sure that someone is taking a look at our books to ensure that everything is in order. So I also brought on a treasurer for the association, because I want 3 or more people looking at my numbers all the time to ensure that everything is in order. Because if something gets dropped, then that looks bad for the association. It also looks bad for the industry. So I am constantly vigilant about both my strengths and weaknesses. But I think that as far as strengths are concerned, I really enjoy meeting people, learning about them, learning about where they come from, what makes them tick, if I can. I like knowing how people think and what their passions are, so that I can understand where they're coming from, if they're proposing legislation or if they're asking me questions about a different part or aspect of our industry, so that I can get at the why they're asking that more easily than most. And so those are kind of the things that I bring to the table. But beyond that, I also, with my master's degree, have a lot of knowledge about executive leadership and organizational leadership and change, and how that can affect an organization. And so as the industry changes, the association will also change to represent and reflect the needs that the industry has as well. So those are some of the high level things that I bring to the table, but I also am very aware of where I am not my strongest, and where I do not like to spend my time and energy.
Yeah, I'll just put in a plug for if you ever have the chance. It's a very easy assessment. It's called the Gallup Strength Finders, and you can do that. It'll identify, if you're not sure of your own strengths, it'll help you identify them. I think the longer you go in any sort of professional working life, that sort of thing, or the more schooling you do, you find where your interest areas are. And typically we're going to acclimate, and we're going to pursue the types of things that we typically do well. Most of us as humans are going to shun and stay as far away from the things that we don't like as possible. That's strengths and that's weaknesses. Exactly what Kelsey was just talking about. And you'll find that you're going to excel typically in those areas where you're stronger. And I think in our chosen paths, our chosen fields, certainly oral communication skills, the ability to organize thought, the ability to convey those thoughts both orally and verbally, verbally and on paper, are both very important skill sets. And just this whole idea of leadership and making sure that you're continuing to grow in that regard. Anytime that you're in charge of an organization or people or finances or anything like that, there's an element of responsibility that comes along with that you have to surround yourself with good people. Maybe they're contract employees, maybe they're direct employees, direct reports, that sort of thing. But Kelsey's exactly right. You have to recognize where you have your strengths, and you have to recognize where you have your gaps or your weaknesses that you need to fill those gaps. And so, in our fields, we probably share a lot of the same strengths because we're working in the same sectors, quite often. And so I think what I would recommend is for you all is to, what are you passionate about? What do you really like to do? And that's really kind of tied to your strengths. And then, go take that strengths finder at the Gallup Strength Finder. You read 33 pages of a really small book, and then you take an online quiz that takes about maybe 15 minutes, and it spits you back your top 5 strengths. And it's just kind of a neat little tool. And there's a lot of other tools out there just like it.
Awesome. So thank you guys so much for being with us today. Our last question for you was, what is some advice for our students? But your entire panel has been advice for our students, and we thank you so much for that. I know Ben and I learned a lot on this panel as ourselves, and I know that our students will also learn quite a bit from this panel. So thank you so very much for giving us your time this morning. And to our students in the classroom, have a great day.